Hello, Florence, my lovely. Let's continue. All right. Inheritance adjusted her glasses. Yes, well, the history of our great family is my lifelong passion. Inheritance told everyone of her eternal quest for pieces of Swift history, of the maps and blueprints, papers and letters she had amassed, and how, when she had stumbled upon the lost diary of Aunt Memento, she called the reunion with the hope that the Eek would help finally recover Vile's hoard and save the house. I wanted to tell you all right away, said Inheritance, but Schadenfreude warned me to keep my discovery quiet. She incorrectly, she raised her voice slightly, assumed that the Eek was unreliable, but correctly assumed that someone would try to use any information it revealed about the hoard for their own ends. I couldn't believe any one of us would act against the family's best interest. She ripped off the pinky finger of one glove in agitation. I was a fool. And what was even more foolish was asking Gumshoe to look into what had happened to Aunt Schadenfreude. I thought with the name... I believe Shenanigan, Earth, and I were next, interrupted Phenomena. Her finger twitched with the desire for a board or a piece of chalk or something with which to gesture, despite Gumshoe's appalling destruction of the crime scene. Be nice, Phenomena. He is dead, murmured Cook. I won't pretend he was a good detective just because he's dead, huffed Phenomena. Anyway, despite him, we began it logically. Our short list of suspects was made up of everyone who missed dinner the first night and shortened further by establishing everyone's alibis. We initially dismissed Candor because Aunt Dither said he had given her a sedative to help her cope with her diphophobia. Not sure how to say that. Dipnophobia. And stayed on to watch with her afterwards. He did, insisted Dither, her parrot hat wobbling with conviction. We played chess, and then when the others turned up, we switched to Scabby Queen to accommodate extra players. The others? Asked Phenomena. Of course, Pharaoh Ramsay III, my brother Findle, and Mary Shelley. There was a brief silence. They're all dead people, Aunt Dither. Well, really, dead or not, that Ramses owes me 50 pounds. I suppose it must have been a rather strong sedative, said Phenomena weakly. I think it's safe to assume that Aunt Dither's statement was not reliable. She gathered herself. Yes, our first real clue was a partial bean of Kopi Luwak, or civet coffee, found at the crime scene. Phenomena's part of the story took them through their chat with Flora and Fauna, their chance encounter with Gumshoe, and the interrogation of Atrocious and Peak, which had given them the idea that the hoard and the attempted murder might be connected. Following the conversation, I had several questions, said Phenomena, pacing back and forth with her hands tucked behind her back. What was our would-be killer's motive? Who stood to gain the most from Aunt Schadenfreude's death? I don't mind saying that at that time my main suspect would have been you, Aunt Inheritance, but that was before we overheard a suspicious conversation between... At that moment, the door to the study opened and Uncle Maelstrom entered, supporting the last missing member of the group. Flora and Daisy, finished Phenomena. When Daisy saw Flora, she gave a cry and ran to her, clasping her good hand. I'm all right, said Flora. I'm all right. Her eyes flickered over Daisy as if she were checking every visible millimeter for damage. Daisy looked horrible, or awful. Her hair was in disarray, and she had a bag of ice pressed to the side of her head. Shenanigan remembered the sickening crack the stock of the crossbow had made connecting with her skull. At the sight of her, some of the charm leaked back into Candor's face. Daisy, he breathed. You must help me. Tell them I didn't... Don't you dare. The glare Flora turned on Candor would have melted steel. She tried to struggle upright, but Fauna and Daisy pushed her back firmly into her chair. I don't think so, said Daisy to Flora, exasperated. You can sit right there until you've proven you can keep all your blood inside you, right, Fauna? Oh, wait, and to your blood. Sorry, she's talking a little more caringly because it's to Fauna or Flora. Flora slumped, scowling between her wardens, but her hand remained in Daisy's. Miss DeMille, said Aunt Schadenfreude crisply, looking Daisy over with faintly pursed lips. If you are feeling up to it, we should like to hear your side of things now. Daisy turned to face the room, her spine straightened. Shenanigan was reminded again of the steel core running through her center. In some ways, I guess this is an old song, she said. Sing along if you know the words. I met Candor a few months ago. He swept me off my feet. He was sweet, funny, charming, kind, adventurous. He wanted to see the world like I do and help others. We went on vacation together. He met my family. He proposed. Thespian nodded. A whirlwind romance. A perfect match, added Renee. You were the golden couple of the society pages, said Covetous. But then I discovered money had been going missing. Daisy twisted the ring on her finger. Candor said he borrowed it to buy my engagement ring. He said he was just having a little financial trouble, perhaps, suggested Peake. But still wanted to buy you something worthy of your beauty, added Atrocious. Yes, and I believed him, and we put it behind us. Daisy's eyes glittered. But the money kept disappearing. My signature turned up on checks that I had never signed. I knew he was drawing money out of my bank account, but it wasn't like I couldn't spare it. And anyway, I loved him. You're right, said Inheritance. This is an old song. Daisy looked up. When she spoke again, her voice was hard. Let me tell you something about my family. Our name isn't as established as yours. My parents came from nothing, and some people never forget that. This awful old dowager once said to me that new money is paper, old money is gold, and it took me a while to understand what she meant. She meant that my family could have more money than the Federal Reserve, but because there isn't a coat of arms somewhere with DeMille on it, or even Mills, which was our name before we changed it, we don't matter. Flora squeezed Daisy's hand. Like I said, she said, breathing deeply, it's an old song, but I didn't learn it till it was too late. When Aunt Schadenfreude called Candor a leech that first night, it was like a pail of cold water. I knew I had to confront him about the missing money. Daisy didn't look at Candor. She fixed her eyes on the far wall. He just laughed. He told me he gained access to my accounts within a month of meeting me and had been siphoning money ever since. I said I wanted to break off the engagement, but he said that if I exposed him, my family would never recover from the scandal. We'd be laughing stocks. It would confirm everything people thought about us. He said the only way to save face was a sham marriage and a divorce in a year or two, once he got all the cash he needed. The Swifts nodded. It was the story Shenanigan herself had been telling about Daisy and Candor the whole time, that one of them was marrying the other for the money. She just got it the wrong way around. Daisy shook her head, disgusted. You'll all probably think I'm stupid. Aunt Schadenfreude shook her head. No, she said, and Flora together. Candor looked as if he wanted to say something, but Aunt Schadenfreude's stick slipped and caught him on the broken leg. Candor's made up something about migraines to explain why I wasn't coming down for dinner, Daisy continued. But after Cook brought me my tray, I snuck out. I was still in shock. I was just wandering. I ran into Flora on accident. She took one look at my face. I'd been crying. I was a total mess, and told me to tell her everything. She promised to help me. You didn't think to come to us? Aunt Schadenfreude turned a disapproving stare on Flora. Obviously not, snapped Flora. You gave us no reason to trust you. I swore her to secrecy, Daisy put in. I couldn't risk word of this getting out. We wanted to contact my lawyer. Atrocious was hogging the phone, so we couldn't get to it right away and find a way to quietly dissolve the engagement without my family's name getting dragged through the mud. Afterwards, I ran back to my room in case Candor noticed I was gone. And you never suspected him of pushing Aunt Schadenfreude? Asked Phenomena. Daisy shook her head. I didn't think he was capable of that. I didn't even know he'd been to see her that night. I suspected, said Flora, her good shoulder lifted in a shrug. But then I suspected most of you because you're all heinous. It didn't matter. Once the cars and the phone were sabotaged, we had no way of getting a message out. I remembered the hidden passage in your study, Aunt Shad, from when Fauna and I stayed here. We were going to borrow a road atlas, steal Cook's bike. Sorry, Cook. We nicked your keys, and one of Maelstrom's compasses, slip out through the passage and drive till we found the nearest phone. But then, tonight, I was packing for our escape, and I knocked over Candor's bag, said Daisy. The crossbow was inside. And by that time, he'd found out about us working together somehow. He found me in the study. He had his tiny gun. Aunt Schadenfreude pulled the palm pistol from her pocket and placed it on the table by her elbow. Yeah, said Flora, that one. Shenanigan stared at the palm pistol. She had been the one to tell Candor about Flora and Daisy. Her map had led him to the study. Daisy and Flora slumped in a chair, bleeding and seemingly dead. But instead, Daisy had found Flora. No wonder she had turned the crossbow on Candor. Aunt Schadenfreude tapped her stick thoughtfully. I think it's best if we call for an intermission at this stage, she said. More refreshments are needed. I wish to use the toilet. Go now. Potty time. All right, chapter 33, Swift Justice. I don't know what that picture is of. I see Swift Justice, but I don't know if it almost looks like a bowling ball, but it's not. It really was like the interval to a play. People chatted among themselves as Cook came around again with more cocoa for the deserving. Candor did not get cocoa. Candor got filthy looks mostly. He bore this with unnerving calm, smiling absently at the wall, as if he had a second gun hidden up his sleeve, invisible and loaded. It made Shenanigan uneasy. They resumed their tale of the death of Gumshoe. Earth had to relate this bit over loud, despairing noises from Aunt Inheritance, who assumed her grandchild had been sitting quietly in a corner out of harm's way the entire weekend. The statue didn't trap Gumshoe. Gran, please. The crossbow trap did, said Earth. Gumshoe arrived late at the reunion, so he didn't hear Aunt Schadenfreude's speech about how dangerous, all right, I promise, the library is. Oh, I'm all right, I promise. He found Aunt Schadenfreude's keys and assumed it was fine to go in and start rifling through the books. It was lore and law of the family Swift that got him, added Shenanigan. Candor was following him and saw the crossbow go off. He took advantage of the convenient weaponry and disguised the cause of death. Phenomena rubbed her temples. No wonder I found this case so difficult to crack, she muttered, glaring at Candor. You hardly planned anything. Everything you do is reactive. You're like nitrogen. On your own, pretty harmless, but introduce you to an unstable situation and... She made an explosive sound. You make everything worse. The story was passed back to Phenomena, who recounted their retrieval of the crossbow bolt from Pamplemouse's body and the note with the killer's handwriting. When she mentioned that the place cards at Schadenfreude's funeral had been done in the same writing, Flora groaned. I didn't even look at my card, or I'd have recognized the writing from the Scrabble moves. Wait, were you going to frame Daisy? Flora struggled to her feet again, glaring hatchets at Candor. But Daisy and Fauna each put a hand on her good shoulder and sat her down. Doctors have appalling penmanship, noted Phenomena, and he'd already been forging Daisy's checks for months. Daisy would have been the easiest suspect to sell to the family, added Cook. Shenanigan remembered the shame, the speed of her own suspicion. What a good thing most of you decided it was me. As Jilt and her cohorts shuffled their feet and coughed uncomfortably, Maelstrom, clearly feeling left out, recounted the seance that they had conducted with the Eek. When he mentioned the ghost's message that the treasure was under house, several people surreptitiously made a note. One or two eyed the door. It wasn't a ghost, insisted Phenomena. Cook looked smug. It was a random fluctuation of electromagnetic energy, or we subconsciously influenced it or something. Speaking of dead people, Felicity glared at Aunt Schadenfreude. What did we bury? This pause was more uncomfortable than the first. Ah, yes. Aunt Schadenfreude sipped her chocolate. You buried a suit of armor, actually. I woke up after Pamplemouse's unfortunate demise. Cook by my side. The two of us hatched a plan. She would smuggle me out of the study via the secret passage. We would fake my death, and I would wait in the cellar until the time was right to reveal the truth. I borrowed a trick from Shakespeare and was going to surprise Candor by appearing as a ghost at dinner tonight. And you thought this plan required just the two of you? Asked Maelstrom, his voice soft and hurt. I rather wanted to derive some joy from Candor's suffering, if only there was a word for that. Oh, I see. The girls and I were grieving Schadenfreude, said Maelstrom. Aunt Schadenfreude shifted. I underestimated the impact my death would have. We have rehearsed it so often. Maelstrom gave her a look that promised future discussion. Shenanigan, he prompted, it's your turn. A few hours ago, Shenanigan would have relished being the center of attention, the grand finale to a long and complicated mystery. But now all she wanted to do was sleep. Still, she gathered herself up and stretched. All right, she said. So while you were all busy wrongly accusing Cook, and Aunt Schadenfreude was hiding in the cellar, and Flora was bleeding everywhere, I saw Daisy leading Candor into the hedge maze. When Shenanigan had finished her part of the story, there was a sigh of relief. Good show, Shenanigan, said Fortissimo. Yes, you were very brave, said Dither. Yes, you could have been a bit quicker off the mark, though, said Peake. So who's going to call the police? Asked Felicity. There was dead silence. Aunt Schadenfreude blinked. Police? Nobody is calling the police. It said a lot about Felicity that despite all the outrage she expressed in the past days, she still had some left over. But Candor murdered someone. Candor, who had almost faded into the carpet, finally spoke. Technically, he said, a smile in his voice, I didn't murder anyone. I just took a crossbow, borrowed a book, and rearranged Gumshoe's head a bit. Auntie's obviously fine, as is dear Flora. I'm not even guilty of property damage. I've no idea who stole all your steering wheels or broke the phone. Oh, said Daisy, I'm pretty sure that was Gumshoe. I saw him tossing things in the lake on the first night. Phenomena sighed, and Shenanigan rolled her eyes. Trap everyone in the house to stop the killer from escaping and buy himself time to solve the case? That seemed like a Gumshoe move. He still tried to poison me, said Phenomena. And he kicked John the cat, Earth added. He murdered Pamplemousse, cried Felicity, in front of us all. Candor grinned lazily. Aunt Inheritance? The archivist sighed. There is no family law against attempted murder, she said grudgingly. In the past, it was considered useful training, so one could get used to outsmarting assassins. As for Pamplemousse, she continued over Felicity's indignant shout. He challenged Candor to a duel to the death. Candor won. Under the dueling code set out by Litigious Swift in 1737, Candor committed no crime by killing Pamplemousse. It's all set out quite clearly in Law and Law of the family Swift. So, he isn't going to be punished? Asked Shenanigan. She looked at Felicity, whose expression was the same as had been after Felicity had released the moss from her wardrobe, roughly 700 years ago. Then she looked at Aunt Schadenfreude, stiff-necked and impassive. Yes, he will, said the matriarch. He will be excommunicated. He will be stripped of his name. No one in this family shall ever contact him ever again or provide him any aid or assistance. Flora, Daisy, if either of you should wish to hire a bounty hunter to enact further justice for the injury you have suffered, that is within your rights. I'll think about it, said Flora grimly. In short, said Aunt Schadenfreude, her tone was icy, and Candor quailed under the gaze she now turned on him. Candor Swift will no longer exist. Inheritance will expunge your name from our records. All documentation proving your existence will be shredded. Every one of your assets, your money, your home, your medical degree will be seized, redistributed, or destroyed. You will have nothing. You will be no one. Her lips quirked. Not even a ghost. But I didn't do anything wrong, said Candor, his voice shaking. You can't do that. I can, said Aunt Schadenfreude. I already started. And she reached out and tore the gold name badge from his jacket. Candor began to shout. They weren't even words. They were howls, incoherent screams of rage. He thrashed in his robes, rocking the desk until a paperweight fell and hit his broken leg. He shrieked out in pain and then lay back panting. This is an injustice, he hissed. I know some of you agree with me, and there are others. I won't be made to disappear. Cover him in a blanket and toss him in the freezer with his handiwork. At breakfast tomorrow, I shall pick my successor, said Aunt Schadenfreude, ignoring him thoroughly. Dismissed. Oh, I think he should go to jail for Pamplemousse. You know, I'm kind of upset about that. All right, we'll end there and we'll begin chapter 34 when we read again. I love you, birthday girl.